spookier, maybe unknown cases a little later on in the month. This is a solved case, and it does involve a baby, so again, like last week, if that is a trigger for you, I'm not going to talk about what happened to the baby, but it does involve a baby. So anyway, I like to give precursors because I know that there are some triggers. So there will be a solved case on the channel and a solved case on Patreon if you're one of my patrons. That will also be up today. That one's not a spooky one, it's just a solved one. So this is the case of Doreen Erbert. Sorry, learn how to read, Shannon. Doreen Erbert was born Doreen Ray Hitchens in Santa Rosa, California in the year 1952. Her childhood was described as peaceful, loving, and supportive. Later on in life, she went to school to become a physical therapist, and she eventually got a position in an office in the San Francisco Bay Area. Now, Doreen was married twice. First to a man named Michael Dennis, and then later to a man named Charles Erbert. He was a carpet store owner, but we'll talk more about both of them in just a little. Doreen had what people described as a loving, gentle, generous spirit, and this attracted a large volume of clients to her job, and one of which was her first husband, Michael Dennis. Mike worked as a sprayer for the Lockheed factory, which was right next door to Doreen's job. Michael had suffered from hearing loss that caused him to stutter when he spoke, and his stutter kind of prevented him from socializing and dating normally, because people are mean. But this allegedly caused him to suffer from depression, which I could totally understand. Now, Michael and Doreen had a son whose name was Paul. Paul was born April 17th, 1976. He was the only child that the two of them had. He lived with them until he was about 1, and his parents got a divorce. Tragically, at the age of 4, Paul climbed a fence and fell into the backyard pool. He was unable to swim, and he drowned before Doreen was able to save him. She did rush him to the hospital, but it was too late. He was put on life support for 3 days before being pronounced dead. 2 years later, a distraught Michael tried to sue Doreen and her new husband for the unlawful death of their son. Unfortunately, he did not, not unfortunately, he did not win that court case. They did not find Doreen neglectful. So now, he's lost his wife, he's lost his son, and he is agitated and depressed, and he really develops some anger towards Doreen and her new husband. So that brings us to the night of Halloween 40 years ago, October 31st, 1984. And it started off like many Halloween nights in the small, sleepy city of San Jose, California. Now, remember that Doreen is with her new husband, Charles, and the two of them have a daughter named Deanna, and she is 8 months pregnant with their second child, a little boy. So, an eager young Deanna went trick-or-treating with her father for a little while, and Charles saved like the last couple houses so that Doreen could take Deanna around months pregnant. She wasn't really up for the whole night. So when they got back, Charles decided he was going to run to the store. Before they were going to cuddle up on the couch and watch a movie. Deanna remembers kids knocking on the door and her mom going and giving out candy and stuff. Charles said he was going to go get some more candy from the store and he would be back soon, leaving Deanna and Doreen at the house alone. Deanna recalls that it wasn't too long after her dad left, there was a knock on the door. And it wasn't a regular knock like, trick-or-treaters. It was harsh. And as soon as her mom opened the door, someone yelled, "I'm going to kill you." Deanna heard her mom scream for her to hide, and as a smart child at roughly 4 years old, that is exactly what she did. She ran behind the couch and covered herself up. The killer was wearing a pair of mechanic's overalls, and I've seen a picture, a terrifying wolf mask. After savagely attacking Doreen, the killer searched the house for Deanna, who stayed hidden behind the couch. And he shouted that if she said anything, he was going to come back and kill her. Now, he didn't stay long to try to find Deanna. He left his wolf mask by the door and ran. 2 or 3 minutes later, or an eternity to Deanna, she heard her dad coming back home. He came back in the house and found his wife on the floor, deceased. And I don't know exactly the details, but either the baby was removed or she had what's called a coffin birth, but either way, the baby was visible. So Charles sends Deanna to the neighbor's house and he calls the police. There was so much blood in this scene that he fell coming into the door, so when the police arrive, he's covered in blood and he is completely unconsolable. So they put him in the patrol car because he's freaking out. Totally understandable. One of the retired police officers said, "As I looked into the window of the patrol car, I could see that he was extremely agitated, hyperactive, screaming and yelling, 'My wife, my wife, my wife.' At some point, he tried to kick the windows out of the patrol car and was smashing his head up against the window." So Charles is considered a person of interest and taken to police headquarters. When the police go in to the home, they make this terrible discovery. Doreen had been brutally murdered, and her tiny baby lay on the floor underneath a chair that had a leering jack-o'-lantern on it. Saldivar said, "I looked at the jack-o'-lantern and it's smiling over this baby, and it was completely out of a horror film. search his house. But when he goes to sign papers to give authorities permission to do this, they notice his right hand has a large cash in it. He tells detectives he cut his hand earlier that night while carving a pumpkin. However, the large amount of blood still oozing from the wound made them kinda suspicious. So several officers begin to search the house. Detective Saldivar follows Michael Dennis upstairs to get his identification. He starts climbing the stairs and he turns and he looks over his shoulder, detective says, and he looks at me with this lifeless, demonic stare. At this point, Saldivar pulls out his weapon and continues to follow Michael Dennis up the stairs. Once they reach the bedroom, Michael seems to lunge towards the head of the bed. Saldivar orders him to stop and discovers a shoulder holster for a gun on the side of the headboard with a loaded .357 Magnum inside. And he says, I figure right off the bat, he's gonna unalive himself, or he's gonna shoot it at one of us. One of the two, because I know he was going for that gun. Saldivar took charge of the weapon and ordered Michael Dennis back down the stairs. Meanwhile, the other detectives have been quite busy discovering blood all over this house, basically. It led to the washer in the garage. There were blood smears on the handle of Michael's truck, the steering wheel, and the ignition. They immediately take him into custody as a possible person of interest. So with two separate suspects now in holding, they have to set to work to determine the killer. They were fairly quickly able to clear Doreen's husband Charles after finding a store employee that remembers him at the store the night of Doreen's death. And video footage also places him at the store, which in 1984 is a pretty big deal if you ask me. Now, in order to charge Michael with the crime, they have to get some more evidence. In fact, they had to release him and re-arrest him once they found it. Using a black book that Michael had on him at the time of his arrest, Carol reached out to his friends and romantic interests, and they found a woman who said she had been at a Halloween party with Michael the year before. And guess who he was dressed as? The big bad wolf. Authorities even found the photo of him wearing the exact same mask that the dummy left at the crime scene. During multiple searches of Michael's home, they also discovered the clothes that he'd been wearing in the photo, packaging for an 18-inch machete, which investigators believe was used in the crime, and two handmade coffins, which they suspect he made for Doreen and Charles. Blood analysis confirmed that someone with Dennis's blood type had left blood at the murder scene. Michael Dennis, I know that's confusing because that's his last name, and Doreen's blood type was found in Michael's house. Even more damaging, the crime scene investigators followed the blood trail from Doreen's house right to Michael Dennis's house. This guy was not very bright, and so he dresses up in this hideous costume, attacks his ex-wife, brutally murders her on Halloween night, kills her baby, and then tries to find her 4-year-old daughter in order to kill her too. Michael Dennis is officially charged with the murders of Doreen and her unborn child just days after the brutal murders. 4 years later, the case would head to court. After prosecutors laid out their case, Michael Dennis changed his plea to not guilty by reason of insanity. His attorneys argued he'd been driven mad by the loss of his son and was triggered on Halloween night when he watched the other children happily head out to trick or treat. A jury didn't buy the defense, and Michael Dennis was convinced of first-degree murder for Doreen's death and second-degree murder the death of her child. He received the death penalty, but when the state of California overturned the death penalty, his sentence was converted to life in prison. In the years since this brutal murder, Deanna has really tried to understand her mom's death, and she's even taken back the Halloween holiday to try to regain control over her life. She said, "I can understand him losing a child. I get that. But you took something from me as well. You took something big. You took my mother. You destroyed our family, and I won't forget that. I do forgive him for it because of my own sanity. I don't want to be angry anymore," she said. Which I think is kind of definitely being the bigger person. Forgiving and forgetting are two different things. Okay, so let's talk about this a little. I'm not going to excuse what this man did. However, like Deanna said, I understand. You've lost your wife. You don't really meet a lot of people. You kind of have some social anxiety. Dating is super hard for you. She moved on sort of quickly, already has another child, is pregnant again with another boy. You feel like she forgot about you and your son, and you're feeling a little twitchy, okay? However, you went out and purchased an 18-inch machete a couple days before Halloween. They found the receipt in the house. I can't remember exactly how many days. I find that a little premeditated. You can't tell me that Halloween triggered you when you went out and did that. The wolf mask coverall thing is so terrifying to me. One year, I don't even remember, at least 20 years ago, I remember trick-or-treat that we were at my sister's house, and I had come home, I'd gone somewhere and I'd come home, and it was super late, and we heard this knock at the door, and there was this kid who very well could have been an adult, dressed in a Michael Myers costume, like perfect Michael Myers costume, and he didn't say anything. He's just swaying at the door, just swaying, and it was so creepy, and I was like, oh god, I should have shut and locked the door before now. So I just stuck the candy bowl out, and I was like, here, take whatever you want. Like, okay, and then I was done. So I can't imagine somebody dressed as the big bad wolf, and this wolf mask was creepy. I'll probably use it in the thumbnail so you have seen it by now, but what a terrible, senseless crime this was. That poor little baby who never even got a chance, didn't get to die with his mama, was separate from his mama. I have no idea if they named him or not. She was 8 months pregnant, so I had to think that maybe she had a name picked out with Charles, but I didn't find it in any of my research, and that makes me kind of sad too. Anyway, thank you guys so much for being here for this video. I know, again, it's a little shorter than my normal videos, but I have a really long one planned for around Halloween, and sort of a medium length one for in between there somewhere, and several haunty stories that I've got picked out. I just have to find time to film them. I have one that I think Sean is going to do as well, because he hasn't been on the channel in a minute. I don't think he's filmed anything in this house at all. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you knew about this case, and if you would be terrified if the big bad wolf showed up at your door with an 18-inch machete. He wasn't the smartest guy. He definitely, literally left a trail right back to himself. So I don't really know what he hoped to kind of get out of this. It's not like he was trying to cover his another Spooktober video.